Yeah, I will start with the bio of Mr. Vishal Anand. Vishal Anand received BE degree from Bharatiyar University, Coimbatore in 2001 and MS degree from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore in 2005. He worked at Tata Motors Private Limited, Pune from 2005 to 2005 November as manager. From December 2005 to August 2006, he worked with American Power Conversions as design engineer. From 2006 to present day, he has been with Bloom Energy Private Limited with a brief stint at Delta Energy Systems Germany in the year 2012. At Bloom Energy, he has held multiple roles and is currently working as principal engineer, where he leads a team working on inverter projects. He is working towards his PhD at Indian Institute of Science and holds 4 US patents. His primary area of interest are in modeling, control, design of grid, connected or standalone, inverters, topology, analysis, and control of resonant converters. He is the secretary of IEEE Power Electronics Society, Bangalore chapter. A warm welcome to you, Mr. Vishal Anand. Uh, Today he is going to speak to us on grid integration of inverters. I hand over this virtual podium to Mr. Vishal Anand to continue his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sujata, for those words. I would like to first up thank the IEEE Bangalore section and the IEEE Power Electronics Society for giving me this opportunity to share my few thoughts on the grid integration of inverters. And I also welcome all the members to this particular talk. Without much ado, we'll just go on to the content of the discussion today. So this is going to be the agenda of my talk today. So I'll just brief about the grid inverters architecture and then go on to the control of grid inverters. And then once the control is done, we'll talk a little bit about 3-level neutral point clamp inverters, followed by the hysteretic current control of inverters. And then lastly, we'll talk about how inverters support grid functions and also have a few thoughts on the compliance to utility standards. So what is the architecture of the grid inverters? What are the different topologies involved? So before that, just a slide on the distributed power generation today. So with the advent of new generation techniques like fuel cell and solar and wind, there's a lot of focus on power generation being distributed, where going from the centralized model, we go to a distributed model, have multiple sources feeding power into the grid. So this slide shows one particular model where which we follow in our company, Bloom Energy. So this the picture here shows our Bloom Energy server that takes inputs of fuel basically from different sources like hydrocarbons, biogas, and natural gas, and then generates the DC power. And we have what is called the common DC architecture, where individual modules generate the DC and everything is tied together to make a common bus. And to this bus, we can integrate third-party solar DC solutions like solar or from wind, of course, with the conversion from AC to DC. And that is on the source side. And multiple application-based load side interfaces are available with us, which we can use it to differing kind of needs from the customer. Like we have EV charging or islanded AC output, or also DC outputs, which can power microgrid, DC microgrids or AC power on multiple aspects. But the focus of today's talk is going to be on the load interfaces that typically have AC outputs. On that too also, we are going to only discuss more on the grid tie AC output. So looking at grid tie inverters, what are the basic functions of the grid tie inverter? So grid tie inverter basically takes a DC input from a regulated DC bus and connects on the output to the grid. So one of the primary functions of the grid tie inverter is to be able to generate variable frequency and amplitude sinusoidal output voltage in phase with the grid voltage, or of course the variable phase depending on the power factor commands. And it's also going to continuously monitor the voltage and frequency of the grid and disconnect if the conditions are not conducive to power generation. And it also has to synchronize with the grid phase and frequency. And also it has to support the grid by adjusting its phase, like I told earlier, to support power factor. And in case of certain conditions where an island is formed, even when the grid is not available, it has to detect the island formation and disconnect itself. These are the primary functions of the grid tie inverter. In terms of topology, this is not an exhaustive list, but it covers most of the models that are available today in the market. So we talk about single phase and three phase. In single phase, again, we have classifications of 2-level and 3-level. And in term here again, it goes down to a full bridge inverter. That is a single phase topology. In three phase inverter topology, we have more variations where we have 2-level inverters and 3-level inverters. Again, in 3-level inverters, we have INPC or what you call NPC and the TNPC. And of course, on the NPC, we can again have diode clamp and current capacitors. This is the overall flavor of the different topologies available, but still not exhaustive. But this can cover almost 90% of all the topologies that exist today in the market. Looking in particular on the single phase inverter topology, so this is a regular H bridge topology, and then followed by a LC filter going onto the grid. So here, in terms of modulation, we have two types: what we call the bipolar or the 2-level inverter, and on the right side we have the unipolar. This is called 3-level inverter. So the if you look at the pros and cons of both these topology or control methods, we see that in bipolar PW we have 2 voltage levels on the output, whereas in the unipolar we have 3 voltage levels, and it's easier to implement the 2-level because you just need a single modulation, whereas in a 3-level you need to have 2 modulating waves and 4 control signals. But the 3-level gives a better harmonic performance because look at the pole voltage, it is closer to the sign. Whereas in case of a 2-level inverter, the harmonic and performance will be poorer. And the switching loss is also going to be higher in case of 2-level inverter, as the DC bus voltage swings a lot larger than the 3-level inverter. So this is just about comparison on the unipolar and bipolar for a single phase. Moving on to three phase, if you compare 2-level and 3-level, the topology is much more complex when you see a 3-level here. We have a higher number of devices and gate circuits, and also control is a little bit more complicated. But because of the higher complexity, the harmonic performance is better. And devices with lower switching loss are required in the 3-level because the net voltage being blocked by each device is much more smaller, which means the switching losses comparatively come down. So this is about the 3-phase inverter topology. And again, with respect to 3-level, we have 2 types of topologies. One is called the neutral point clamp T type. Another one is called the neutral point clamp I type. So here, this is the high-level architect topology comparison. So in this case, the control, if you see, device Q1 and Q3 here are complementary. Same is applicable to here also. The devices Q1 and Q3 are complementary. And the same is true for the Q2 and Q4 of both these topologies. So higher voltage rating will be required for the devices Q1 and Q4, whereas we can get away with lower voltage rating in all the devices here. And no additional clamping diodes are required here, but here you have 2 additional diodes for the neutral point clamping. And there are trade-offs for both these topologies, and so effectively which particular one is being used is a end application driven, and the switching frequency and all those things come into picture. So that covers all the topology aspects of grid inverters. Now we look at the control aspects of grid inverters. So I'm taking a particular case of the T-type topology, but the control is same for any particular topology that is chosen. So what is actually going to do with the grid inverter control is we need to be able to generate variable frequency, variable amplitude voltage here at this point to be able to synchronize ourselves to the grid. And based on the amount of DC power available in the DC source, the current that's being fed to the grid has to be controlled. So when we mean by control of the grid inverter, we are looking at how we are going to switch the devices Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 to be able to achieve the main function of being able to pump current into the grid. So we use a phase log loop PLL to synchronize the control with the grid input, and the current reference that we generate should be able to change its frequency and phase and amplitude depending on various input parameters. And finally, we also need to continuously monitor the grid voltage here VG for voltage, amplitude, for frequency, and disconnect itself when the conditions are not conducive for power generation. So these are the main aspects of the grid inverter control. So little bit diving deep into the aspect of control, and to keep the analysis simple, we ignore these two the grid side inductance and the capacitance here to keep the analysis simple. So then if we apply the Fourier transform on the voltage at this point Vp here, we can arrive at the fundamental component of the voltage Vpf and other harmonic components. And we understand pretty well that the power flow only happens at the fundamental frequency, and all other frequency is only going to not lead to any power transfer. So the equivalent circuit of the inverter for the fundamental analysis we can consider is this VPF. In series, the inductor followed by the grid voltage. If you look at the phasor here, the voltage that we need to generate VPF should be this voltage to pump particular current IG into the grid. So by varying this voltage fundamental component, we can control how much power we want to flow and at what power factor that we want to flow. So the control of the grid tie inverter shall provide the current reference IGRF based on which the actual current shall flow into the grid. So the value of the current reference is a function of the power available from the DC source, the voltage magnitude of the grid, and also the power factor with respect to which we want to pump power into the grid. So all these are in turn controlled by the PLL. So let's look at the PLL, what the PLL is and what we try to do. So a PLL is basically a phase lock loop. It's a control system that generates an output signal whose phase and frequency is related to the phase and frequency of the input signal. And so why is PLL mandatory when we discuss grid tie inverters? Is because the grid is a independent voltage source which has its own amplitude and own phase. So if we are trying to power something into the grid, try to feed current into the grid, we need to make sure that we are in phase with the phase of the grid. So that's why PLL is required for all grid tie inverters. And so the picture here shows how a PLL is implemented. Basically, we have the input voltage. It could be any waveform or information from the grid. So we have a phase detector that determines the phase, and then we have filter followed by a voltage VCO, so voltage control oscillator, and this gives output signal or the V out, to which we track our current. So here is a basic implementation of a PLL that we show. So this is a grid tie inverter that is taking a DC input and connecting itself to the grid. We need to ensure that the current that we feed here, that's the output of the grid tie inverter, must be in a controlled phase with the grid voltage here, VG. So there are multiple methods by which PLL is implemented. So one such method is a ZCD based phase detector, which we have shown here, the details of which is shown here. So the R phase line to neutral voltage is shown here in the blue waveform. And then this is the ZCD signal that is a function of the is linked to the grid voltage here. So based on the zero cross points of this voltage, we adjust our R phase current to be in phase with the grid voltage. It's a little bit shifted here because this ZCD signal is generated from the line to line voltage, which as we know is generated 30 degrees ahead of the line to neutral voltage. So ZCD based PLL is only one of the techniques. We have a lot of other techniques in literature. Other ones being the stationary reference frame based PLL can also be used for this purpose. But the fundamental concept or the implementation is that the current has to follow the commanded reference. So once that PLL is done out of the way, so what is the next thing that comes under the control is the current control and how we are going to model it. So the function of the controller is to ensure that the inverter follows the command that we are going to generate. So the command in turn can be is a function of a lot of other things like the voltage magnitude, the amount of DC power available. We'll get to that in a while. And the control of the current can again be done in different methods. Can be done on the stationary reference frame or the rotating reference frame, or what we call the DQ coordinate frame of reference. So the output of the current controller is the effective voltage at the pole, that is the VPF that we saw in a couple of slides earlier, which needs to be applied by the switches at the pole VPF. And the modulation of the converter shall be performed again, could be either done at constant switching frequency or variable switching frequency, or what we call the static current control. So this picture here shows the model of the current control, where we have the command current reference IGRF followed by the controller, which gives the controller output. And this in turn is applied on the modulator and the plant. The plant outputs the VPF, and the grid voltage acts as a disturbance applied on the filter. Finally gives the commanded reference, and this current is fed back to the controller, and this is how the closed loop is implemented. And this the picture on the right shows the same picture that we had it on a couple of slides earlier. We have the model with the fundamental frequency model of the inverter followed by the grid side inductor. So this is how the current control is implemented. So that covers the overall control of the grid tie inverter. So now we can look at look a little bit detail level on the 3-level neutral point clamped inverter, how it is going to work. So this shows the architecture of the 3-level neutral point T-type inverter. So as I told earlier, devices Q1 and Q3 are complementary, and devices Q2 and Q4 are switched in a complementary fashion. So when this is on, this device is off, and when this is off, and this device is on. So in the positive off cycle of the grid, devices Q2 and Q4 shall be Q2 shall be on continuously and Q4 shall be off, and devices Q1 and Q3 shall be switching at high frequency. And in the negative off cycle, it's the inverse. Q1 shall be off continuously and Q3 shall be on continuously, and devices Q2 and Q4 shall be switched in a complementary fashion. So I am taking a particular instant on the positive off cycle. So this is what is going to happen in the on state of the converter. So VG is positive and Q2 is continuously on, Q4 is continuously off. And so when this device Q1 turns on, this is the effective equivalent circuit that we see here. So we have at the pole voltage VP, we have VDC applied, and that is going to cause the current through this inductor to rise. And at the end of this, and Q3 is off, so there's no path here. So this is how the current is going to flow, if you see in this picture. So device Q4 shall block voltage VDC, and device Q3 shall block, device Q4 shall block 2 VDC because this device is on, and device Q3 shall block VDC. And if you look at the effective equivalent circuit here, we can write the expression here as shown. LDI VDT is the effective voltage applied on the inductor. So this equation can be rewritten to get the T on time, that is the time for which this device is on, as LDI VDT, L inverter delta I by VDC minus VG. So this is the effective on-state equivalent circuit. So basically, this is the buck converter when you're looking at from the source side to the grid side. So if you look at the off-state equivalent circuit, so we see that Q1 has turned off and Q3 has turned on. So the effective equivalent circuit, as I told, is a buck converter. It reduces to this picture here, where the inductor L inverter is being discharged by the grid voltage VG. So in this case, what happens is Q4 shall block VDC and Q1 again shall block VDC, and the current shall flow through in this path that we show here through the diode D3 and the device Q2, and this is how the current flows happens. Again, for this off time, we can write the effective equation and then get the T of based as shown here. So this is the switching frequency analysis. So now we can, these are the waveforms that we say from the simulator and the actual waveforms. So as I told earlier, during the positive off cycle, only the positive switches are switching, and we can see the pole voltage waveform in the simulated. It's also matching to the actual waveforms that we see here. And in the negative off cycle, we can again see the pole voltage going from 0 to minus VDC, and the current is following. This is the inductor current. So the duty ratio, how is the duty ratio of the switches going to vary? Is going to vary. This is the modulation index. That's a function of the AC output voltage that we want. And Vm sin omega t is how the AC voltage is varying, and we can see the relationship for the modulation of these switches here. So this is the same simulated waveforms, and we can just zoom in and look at what is happening at the switching frequency level. So we can see that as I explained earlier, when the device is turned on, this is for example a positive off cycle. So when the Q1 is turned on, we can see VDC being applied at the pole here, and the current through the inductor rising through delta Ig. And in the off state, we see Q1 turned off and Q4 turned on. We can see zeros voltage applied at the pole here, and we can see the current fall happening due to the minus Vg that is applied on the inductor. So from the earlier derived expression for T on and T off, we can arrive at the possible relationship for the TS. TS is switching time. So that is given by this expression where we add T on and T off. So if we rearrange these terms, we can get this particular commonized expression where Fs is switching frequency and delta Ig is the current ripple of the inductor current. So this is the expression that we arrive where VDC is a function of the DC input that we have and Vg is the grid voltage. So now this leads us to the modulation that we are going to discuss in the coming slides, where if in constant switching frequency modulation is Fs is constant, and so if you look at all these parameters, the L invert is also a constant, and the current ripple once designed is going to be in the constant switching frequency that is going to vary. There is a typo here, so this delta Ig is not there. So what we can arrive is that at constant switching frequency, the delta Ig, that is the current ripple, is going to vary over the sine wave. Whereas in a hysteretic current control modulation, where delta Ig is more or less constant, we can see the switching frequency is going to vary because the term Vg, that is the Vg Vm sin omega t, is going to vary over the line cycle. So now this has led us into the modulation, where we discussed a few thoughts on how hysteretic current control is being done. So this is the overall hysteresis current control architecture that I explained. I'm going to explain. So this is the current control. We have the current reference coming here that is given to a controller that is going to ensure that there is a very minimal error between the reference and the feedback. And the output of this current controller is being fed to two modulators because we need 4 getting signals here in this case, where this modulator IH1 and IL1 is going to control the devices in the positive half cycle. The output of this modulator is going to drive the T and the MB, where the T corresponds to the device Q1 in our architecture, and MB corresponds to device Q3. And this modulator is going to work during the positive half cycle of the grid voltage, and the other modulator, that is IH2 and IL2, this modulator here, that is going to work on the other two devices Q2 and Q4, where B corresponds to device Q2 and MT corresponds to device Q4. So the controller ensures that there is a high gain to the error signal at the fundamental frequency, because we need good tracking with respect to the current reference. And at switching and frequencies beyond the frequency of interest, there's a good attenuation to the error signal. Okay, so this shows the reference and feedback. So the waveform on the left here shows the current reference that is generated, and this we can see the inductor current here. There is an inversion here because of the error amplifier. So we can see that there is a good reference tracking. So how does the current controller work? So this is the Bode plot of the current controller. So with respect to frequency sweep, so this is the low frequency gain of the current controller. So it has a very high gain at low frequency, so that the error tracking is very good. And then at the switching frequency, there is high frequency gain. This is required for the modulator. And then there is a roll off at here at omega pz to attenuate all other frequencies. I think so. One point that I missed about the control is the way I'm explaining this control. We can do. I am doing this control at the fundamental frequency. Of course, there are other techniques to do the control in the rotating stationary reference frame, revolving reference frame, where we go into DC components of the actual current, and then do control at the DC level. This particular implementation is done at the stationary reference frame, where the reference is a 50 Hz signal. Okay, so once the controller does the control and gives its modulation output, so this output of the current control is being modulated to arrive at the gating signals. So here we have the hysteretic modulator. There are other implementations for the constant switching frequency. The modulator is usually a sine triangle modulator or space vector modulator. So the hysteresis current control has a variable switching frequency, as I told earlier. So how to find out how the switching frequency is going to vary over the line cycle? So this is an example of a calculation that I've given for a 2-level inverter. Same is applicable for 3-level also. So we have the T on and T off varying as per these expressions. Now, by considering Vg as Vm sin omega t, MVDC sin omega t, because M is the modulation index, we can now figure out, we can rearrange these terms and arrive at this expression here, where this gives the switching frequency as a function of the DC input and the line inductance and the current ripple. So for different values of modulation M, we can see that how our switching frequency of the converter is going to vary based on the values of M. So for example, here on this graph here, we can see for different values of M, how the switching frequency is going to vary. So this is an example for the hysteresis, how the switching frequency variation is going to be. So we saw the control for one particular phase. Now the same thing is extended for all 3 phases, and this gives us the overall control architecture for the three-phase 3-level inverter. So here we have the inverter plant here. That is a T-type or a 2-level or 3-level plant that is getting connected to the grid. And so we have the feedback of the current signal for the current control. And then here we take the voltage input to generate the PLL. The output of the PLL can give the theta, that is the phase of the grid. And with the sine table, sine table of the implementation, we can have a sine function. We can generate the sine reference, and then based on the voltage that we're sensing, we can have a RMS calculation which can be used for the feed forward of the voltage signal. The feed forward is useful to give a faster response to the current reference. And of course, we have the power command based on the amount of DC power available. So usually if there is solar, so there will be MPPT, which can give how much power we can take from the DC input. So all these things are fed to the multiplier block, which in turn can generate your current reference. Now this current reference is being fed to the controller, and also the output of the controller goes to the hysteretic current control, which generates the 4 signals that we talked about, the Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, or the top and mid top, the output of the hysteretic modulator. So this is the overall control structure, and this is for one particular phase, and the same is replicated for a 3-phase. In case of other implementations of control like the revolving reference frame, we have the alpha beta transformations, and we get a single term, and finally we invert it to get the 3-phase control. So feed forward of the grid voltage is done to maintain the same power. So whenever there is a change in the grid voltage, we don't want the power flow that is being generated to change. So for that, we do the feed forward of the voltage signal to get the same power. So these are some of the simulation waveforms, simulation and actual waveforms. So here we have the, I can show the red waveform here in the background. There's a current reference, and this is the inductor current following the current reference. And we can see there is a variable switching frequency because of the hysteretic modulator. And the waveform on the right shows the output of the controller that provides high gain at 50 Hertz and reduced gain at the switching frequency. So this is the output of the controller that's being fed here. And these are some of the experimental waveforms of the grid tie inverter control. On the left, we see the pole voltage. As I showed earlier, we have the unipolar PWM. So when the grid voltage is on the positive, then we have the pole voltage varying from 0 to VDC that we see here, so that the harmonics is very less on the generated waveform. And when the grid voltage is negative, we have the pole voltage varying from 0 to minus VDC, and we can see the grid current is tracking the voltage nicely. And to look at the switching frequency level, we zoom in into one of these the inductor current and see that we can see the pole voltage varying from 0 to VDC here on the positive line cycle, and also the current following current falling. And when you apply VDC here, you can see the current rise. So that concludes my discussion on the control and the implementation of the grid tie inverter. Now we'll just spend some time on what are the implementation aspects, and in terms of when we are going to connect to the grid, what are the grid support functions that are expected to be performed by the grid tie inverter. One of the primary functions of the grid tie inverter is to support power factor. So what is power factor? Is basically the ratio of the actual electric power to the product of the RMS voltage and RMS current. So in a typical case, typically these two numbers should be the same, but actually when we measure many a times, there's a difference that is due to the presence of the reactive elements. So that consumes current but doesn't do any actual work. So how is power factor controlled? So we saw the control of the grid tie inverter so far. So based on the function of the PLL and the way the current reference is generated, by adjusting the angle of in the stationary reference frame, by adjusting the angle of the current reference with respect to the voltage, we can get any power factor that we desire. So this is a very popular example that we see on the internet, where for a simple analogy to how power factor is explained. So this is a beer mug, and the real content, the beer is actually seen as the real power, and then we have the foam on the beer that is that doesn't really actually account for anything because we are not going to drink it, but it's still occupying a lot of space on the beer mug. So the cost of a mug is for the entire glass of beer, where though we only consume this much, but we still need to pay for the entire content of the beer. So this is just a simple analogy for what power factor is. So why is power factor important? So we can extend that analogy to the actual implementation here. So if you see, this is a grid here, and then we have the building loads connected here. So the distributed energy resource that we have, for example, a Bloom Energy server or some solar, that is typically connected at this point here. So the building loads, the voltage and the current of the building loads are typically reactive. So if you see, this is the grid voltage here, and the current here of the loads connected at the building are typically reactive. So if you look at the power being consumed, so there is some amount of reactive portion that we see of the loads, because typically loads are reactive, motors, refrigerative loads, all these are reactive and they consume a lot of reactive power. On the source side, if you see, look at the distributed energy resource, the source usually will give only the real power. Like for example, solar or fuel cell is going to typically generate only DC power. There is no reactive content in that. So assume that the distributed energy resource is giving all the real power that is being demanded by the load. So what is happening on the grid side is the utility shall end up giving all the reactive power. So if you see that the net power being consumed from the utility is zero, utilities typically don't like this because they don't get to bill the customer for this kind of application. And so the distributed energy resource is going to get all the money, and the utility is going to get only the foam. So which utilities are not really happy about. So the power factor of the reactive power support is very critical for distributed energy resources here. So how to improve the power factor? So it's understood that we cannot change anything on the load side. So what remains is we have to only generate reactive power from the DERs. So distributed grid itself is inefficient because there's a lot of heat being generated, and small improvement in the efficiency of the distribution grid would save a lot of money. So how we can make distributed grid more efficient is to improve the efficiency of the electric flow, and we have to real power is what is going to charge our phones and run the air conditioning and keep our factories producing goods. So we need to reduce the amount of unnecessary heat we have on the conducting line. So traditionally, how do utilities do this? Traditionally, utility companies would have capacitor banks and voltage regulators on the network to make the grid more efficient. But with the advent of distributed energy, it's the onus is on the DERs to provide the VAR to support the grid. So support of VAR is very essential for DERs. So how do we control the power factor in the inverter? So basically, we saw the control, the overall control of the grid tie inverter. So there the waveforms that I showed were also for the unity power factor. But we can easily control the power factor because the current reference itself we are generating. So the command for the PF that we want. So the utility companies would give a command to the distributed DERs to support the PF by sending a command. So that is this PF command here. And based on the command received, the controller at the DER should convert this angle to the angle with respect to the current reference. So this command is given here, and it is being subtracted from the current command that is in phase with the voltage. So that way we can adjust the angle of the current reference with regard to the voltage, and the rest of the control remains the same. So based on that, based on this particular architecture, we can easily control the power factor. So we don't all the reactive power demanded by the load is supported locally by the DER than taking that additional VAR support from the grid. So extending this control of the power factor, we have what is called the volt VAR support. So the volt VAR is a new requirement coming from the utilities where the based on particular voltage levels, the DERs automatically change their VAR so that all the VAR demanded by the loads locally at their end is supported by the DERs than taking all the VAR from the grid side and leading to wastage of electricity. So this is what we call the volt VAR mode. So this graph here shows how the VAR support extended by the DER to the grids locally based on the amount of voltage here is done and implemented. So here again, we have based on the voltage is going, this is the nominal voltage where there is no VAR support. And then as the voltage goes down, we have positive VAR, and when the voltage goes up, we have negative VAR. Again, here we have different kinds of power priority where we have a priority between active and reactive power. So based on the setting that is done on the user interface, we can get into active power priority or reactive power priority. If the active power is priority, then if there is a particular situation when voltage is changing, then only the active power is increased to maintain the same VA. And in the other case where the reactive power is priority, when the voltage is changing, the real power is reduced and the reactive power is increased because the priority is set to reactive power. So this is one particular case of a volt VAR grid support. Similar to volt VAR, the utilities now mandate we also need to have frequency watt. So where because we know that the frequency is linked to the real power flow, because on the distribution side, the generators are going to change their speed based on amount of real power that is being changed, being drawn by the grids by the loads. Sorry. So here we see that if the frequency on the grid is increasing, which means that there is a lesser load on the grid, due to which so the DERs have to reduce the amount of power that they are generating. And if the frequency is going down, which means there's more load on the grid, and all the DERs have to support the grid by increasing their generation. So this mode is very particularly useful when we connect DERs to DG sets where they're supporting the load locally. And yeah, this is one particular implementation. So all these functions have to be implemented in grid tie inverters to automatically support the grid. So that completes my discussion on how the grid tie inverter is going to support the grid with the other grid support functions. Now the last part of my talk is going to be on the compliance to utility standards. So because we are all the grid tie inverters are interacting with the grid, so it's very essential that we need to comply to some standards. So each country has a different kind of standards, different grid codes that they have. In certain countries, there are two different frequencies of operation. So we have 50 hertz and 60 hertz. So the Indian grid code is shown here, and IEEE 1547 is the grid connection followed in US. Most of our installations in Bloom Energy are in US, so we comply to most of IEEE 1547. And this table here shows the applicable grid standards in different countries. And we can see on the left, we have a lot of grid support functions that I talked about earlier. We have the BF, we have the volt var here, and then we have certain other functions like write-throughs, which I didn't explain, but that is also an important requirement. And these are the standards of those particular countries. So why is grid standards important? So grid standards ensure that the operation of the inverter is safe and when it's tied to the utility. And there is also compliance. There is also compliance from the certifying authority that we are certified against during operation against electric hazards like shocks, flashovers, fire hazards, and mechanical hazards. And also the availability of answer standards ensure that there is a level playing field. Anyone working new today, suppose I want to start a company, and there's the playing field is level, so that if I comply to that standard, then I'm free to sell my product in the market. And DERs like solar and fuel cells have provided additional capacity to the grid power generation because it's distributed. So the grid is supported by these DERs. So the grid standards provide a framework for all these manufacturers to be able to generate and being able to feed power into the grid. That's why grid standards are important. So one of the important topics in the grid standards is islanding. So what is islanding? Is basically islanding is when you are a grid tied inverter here and you are connected to the load, and this is a current for inverter. So in cases where there is no grid available, the current into this load here will result in a voltage, and the grid, the inverter might keep thinking that it is seeing the grid when actually the grid has faulted. So what is anti-islanding is basically the inverter must be able to detect this and then disconnect itself, because we don't want the inverter to be powering when there is no grid available. So what are the different methods? We have passive anti-islanding and active anti-islanding, and we have utility-based anti-islanding methods, and these are all available here in this link. So we'll just look at a few passive anti-islanding methods. So this graph here shows how the grid tie inverter must be tied to the grid when the voltage is falling in the shaded region here. So this is the voltage against time. So whenever the voltage of the grid falls outside of these shaded portions, it means that the voltage is not good, and the inverter must disconnect itself from the grid. So the inverter must continuously keep looking for these signals. So this is a table here that shows the grid voltage and the clearing time. So whenever the voltage is lesser than these values for a time that is shown here, then the grid tie inverter must disconnect itself and stop powering. And of course, these are all adjustable voltage levels and adjustable settings here, which the utility will send as a command to the grid tie inverters, and the inverter has to accordingly respond. So simple example of a passive anti-islanding method detection testing is shown here. So here on the left, you can see how the nominal line-to-line voltage on the inverter, and how this voltage is falling and then slowly crossing the limit that is set. And here on the right, we can see the actual inverter responding. So this is the RMS trend of the voltage, and you can see the voltage slowly changing. And once the voltage falls below the level that we have programmed the inverter for, we see the inverter disconnecting itself and turning off. And this is for a particular, for example, this is for a test for the magnitude. And this is a test for the clearing time, where we see again the voltage jumps here and goes below the level, and we can see the inverter disconnecting here. So these are under voltage, and the same is applicable for over voltage also. Now these are passive aligning methods, because here we assume that once the grid has disconnected itself, we see the voltage falling or the frequency falling. So this table here shows the same settings for the frequency. This for 60 Hz setting, means different countries have the same for 50 Hz, like in India it's a 50 Hz setting. And the clearing time shows the time for which it has to be outside the limit. So those were passive aligning methods. And we also need to have active aligning methods. What if when the grid disconnects, the voltage and frequency don't go outside the limits and stay within the limits? So then in that case, we need active aligning methods. So this is an example of how we are going to check for this. So usually these are tests that is done by the regulatory authority like UL or TE. So they set up a load here, and this is the equipment under test, and this is the actual grid. So usually have for the particular rated R, we have a tuned LC tank that that resonates with the current here and generates a voltage that is in phase with the grid voltage. So since this has the voltage and frequency have not drifted out of the limits, the equipment under test will continue thinking that the grid is available, but the utility standards want us to detect even in this conditions that it's not a real grid, but it's a islanded condition. So when the switch S1 here is open to simulate the loss of utility, so with the anti-aligning algorithm disabled, the equipment under test will keep thinking that the grid is available. So how do we detect this? So this has to be done within a period of 2 seconds. There are multiple techniques available in literature and in the industry. So because this is not a real grid, the grid is not stiff. So we can perturb this grid to check whether the grid is good or not. So the property of the grid is that the voltage and frequency of the grid is really stiff. So when an island is formed, the voltage and frequency are not stiff. So this property is used to detect if the island is formed. So here, if you can see, so this is for example, is a grid, and here we keep perturbing the reactive current. So when you keep perturbing the reactive current, when the real grid is available, the voltage and the frequency of the grid is not going to drift. But when island is formed and we keep perturbing its reactive power, we can see a shift in the frequency which we detect, and then we disconnect ourselves from the grid. So this is the active aligning method that we typically use, and that was my last slide. I would like to take any questions if there are.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vishal Anand, for an informative and an interesting talk on grid integration of converters. It was extremely useful to all of us. So there are a couple of questions which I can share it with you.
Yeah.
Is there any topology which converts single phase AC to three-phase AC?
Single phase AC to three phase AC, there are, but there will be some generation of a DC bus, intermediate DC bus, or maybe there are some other topologies that exist that uses cycloconverters. Yeah, there are of course many papers and a lot of technologies available. Of course, that is definitely possible.
Thank you so much, sir. We have one more question for you. How to model utility grid?
How to model utility grid? In the sense, there are, I think, means depending on from where you look at, there are different aspects. Like we would be looking at the power electronics aspects. Then, of course, my earlier talk was Dr. Saraswati. You will be looking at the power systems aspect. So yeah, depending on how you look at the grid and based on the end applications, there are multiple methods to model the grid. For example, for electronics, we would consider the grid as an infinite source, that is a very stiff source that can sink any load and source any amount of current. So basically, what is the most important aspect of modeling the grid is what is the short circuit impedance of the grid. So what is the maximum current that the utility can provide. So that is that particular number is very important because that tells the capacity of the grid to clear any fault. So basically, if you want to model the grid, that is the most important parameter. So you put a AC source followed by the impedance. So that short circuit impedance is very essential.
Thank you for that, sir. There's one more question. Why have you not considered independent PQ control for grid tied inverters of the vector control approach?
Yeah, definitely there is vector control is definitely possible. I just wanted to, that's why when I talked about also, I said this particular talk is going to focus on the hysteresis current control. there are pros and cons of both these techniques. Hysteresis current control gives very good robust dynamics, and vector control is also, I would say, in terms of bandwidth, it is still limited compared to the hysteresis current control. So we wanted faster dynamics, so we chose the hysteresis current control method for implementation. Vector control is also equally possible, but there are pros and cons of both these approaches. So we chose hysteresis control for the faster dynamics that it offers compared to the vector control.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is, how does industry look forward towards paralleling of inverters in a microgrid application connected to utility?
So the way industry today works is, many companies have implemented microgrids where utilities are connected. So the most popular approach is droop control only. And of course, we have also done some installations like that, where we also implemented. We have not gone exactly in parallel. We have not done the microgrid approach where you are independent. You form the grid also, grid forming also, and you're also going in parallel with the grid. So in such cases, there are multiple approaches. Again, there have pros and cons. Mostly people do droop control, or it could also be master slave kind of approach. But mostly it is droop control is what I have seen so far.
Thank you so much, sir. If you can come on a video mode for a minute, I think our audience would like to see you also, if it is possible.
Yeah. Okay.
Video.
I didn't turn on video.
In case you have sufficient bandwidth, you can always come in. At the bottom, you have the third tab button set for it. In the WebEx where you shared, the third one at the bottom is to start your video. Just wanted to see if the audience wanted to have you on a video. Looks like there's some issue, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Not an issue at all. Thank you so much, sir. It was an interesting talk. And on behalf of IEEE Bangalore section and on behalf of all my participants, I would like to thank you for an informative talk. It was really very useful to us in this knowledge sharing process.
Thanks to IEEE for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir. We have our next speaker. Can you hear me? Anirban Paul? Yes.
Oh, my video is on finally.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.